"I'll give you my Ferrari if you manage to start it." The line sliced under crystal chandeliers and landed in a sea of obedient laughter. At the center of the hall, a yellow Ferrari gleamed like liquid gold, perched on an acrylic platform behind velvet ropes. Glasses lifted, cameras rose, cruelty masqueraded as entertainment. Near the rope stood an old man in a stitched-up coat, cracked shoes, gray in his beard, and winter in his eyes. He didn't laugh. He just studied the machine the way a father studies a child from far away, quiet, intent, as if love could cross any distance. The billionaire's smile widened, certain the joke was his. What no one knew was that the old man's silence would soon roar louder than any engine. If this opening pulled you in, stay with us and consider subscribing for more stories like this. Crystal light puddled across polished marble, catching the edges of shoes that had never met rain. The yellow Ferrari rested on a raised platform, like a prize the room had given itself, paint so deep it seemed warm to the eye, every curve reflecting chandeliers like a string of captive suns. A photographer circled, kneeling and rising, chasing an angle that kept slipping away. Machines are hard to flatter. They prefer to be understood. Victor Hale understood applause. He wore a black tux that fit like certainty and moved as if the floor were there to present him. When he raised his glass, a watch found the light. When he smiled, a corridor of faces turned, happy to be positioned near a man who collected expensive yeses. "Listen," he said to a tight ring of donors, tapping the roof with one knuckle. "The engine is an aria. You just have to own the opera house." Laughter, practiced and bright. At the velvet rope, the old man stood with his hands at rest, palms slightly open, as if ready to accept whatever the night decided. Ernest Salgado wore a coat that had learned to be faithful, and shoes that told long stories in their cracks. Blue eyes, tired but exact, held on the Ferrari, not with hunger, not with envy, but with recognition. He inhaled slowly, and the lines of his face loosened, the way a knot loosens when you pull from the right end. "Sir, a little space, please," said Omar Reyes, security chief, voice made of patience and granite. The earpiece hummed with distant instructions. Omar's hand rose, palm outward, respectful, not forceful. The old man nodded and did not move. That steadiness made Omar look twice. Trouble rattles. This man did not rattle. A few bodies away, Aidan Cole tried to catch the view through shoulders and sequins. 22, clean shirt doing its best to hide a day's grease in the nail seams. Aidan had won an invite through a supplier's raffle and didn't yet believe rooms like this were real. He knew engines the way some people know melodies, a sense of when a note will resolve. The Ferrari's stance alone told him a mood, resting but listening. Maya Brooks preferred nouns to adjectives. Her small camera rode in one hand, a pocket notebook in the other. She collected facts, but more than that, she collected gravity. The way Victor held silence like a leash, the way the crowd grinned with its teeth, the way the old man kept still as a compass needle. She didn't have a story yet, only a center the room kept orbiting. A staffer dimmed the music without being told. Victor slid into the driver's seat as if it owed him the courtesy, pressed start, and the hall bloomed with a controlled thunder. The yellow Ferrari filled the air with vibration, ribcage, glass, and chandelier agreeing for once. People applauded the sound, then themselves for being the sort who could applaud it in person. When the rev faded, Victor let silence drift, admiring his reflection in it. Then he said it. "I'll give you my Ferrari if you manage to start it." He launched the line toward the rope where Ernest stood, as if throwing a coin into a fountain to hear his own wish echo. Laughter came on cue, too fast, too loud. It cushioned Victor like a ritual. Ernest didn't laugh. His jaw worked once, a small tremor, then stilled. He kept his eyes on the car, and the car kept its quiet on him. Omar watched the set of the old man's shoulders and saw a kind of balance he recognized from other lives, the stance of someone who has learned to stand without asking the floor for permission. Aidan slipped sideways until he could see the dashboard reflections in Ernest's eyes. "Sir," he whispered, the word surprised to find itself leaving his mouth. "Don't let him turn you into a trick." Ernest's gaze didn't shift. "Tricks end," he said, voice roughed by years. "Engines keep speaking." Damaya lifted her camera and caught a frame. Gold paint, chandelier constellations, a lined hand near velvet rope. Beneath the image, she wrote a single sentence in tidy script. "He doesn't look hungry for the car. He looks homesick." Victor plucked the smart key between two fingers, twirled it once, then tossed it. The fob skimmed the air and kissed the marble by Ernest's shoes, an expensive sound. Laughter again. The room loved clean punctuation. Ernest knelt with the careful bend of a back that had paid for quick moves. He picked up the key and weighed it as if listening to its balance. For a breath, he closed his eyes, and the years stepped off his face. When he opened them, the tired blue had sharpened. He rose and turned the fob in his palm until it found the right angle, the way a craftsman finds a tool center. Across the rope, Victor leaned on the Ferrari's roof. "We're all friends here," he said, which wasn't true, but people smiled as if it might be. "Let's give our guest a little stage." He gestured, and bodies drifted outward, then inward, forming a crescent of attention. Phones climbed, screens glowed. The night prepared to eat its volunteer. Omar's radio chirped, "Keep it smooth, keep it pretty." He stepped half a pace back from Ernest's path, neither blocking nor granting passage, simply acknowledging that the next move belonged to someone else. He angled his shoulders subtly toward Victor instead. A soldier's instinct he didn't bother to explain to himself. "Name?" Maya asked, soft enough to keep it from becoming a cue. "Ernest," he said, eyes still on the yellow Ferrari. "Ernest Salgado." She wrote the letters carefully, as if each were testimony. A donor behind Maya whispered, "He'll scuff the leather," and another answered, "It's insured." And they laughed softly, the kind of laugh people use when they want to believe they cannot be touched by consequences. Ernest set his palm on the fender without pressure, like greeting a wary animal you respect. For a few seconds he just listened, the faint ticking of heat leaving metal, a whisper of settling plastics, an engine's aftervoice. He nodded once at what only he could hear, then opened the door with a care that was not fear but memory. Leather exhaled. He lowered himself into the seat and adjusted it 2 clicks. Exact, unfussy. Left hand found the wheel. Right hand brushed the gear lever, as if recognizing a shoulder. He didn't perform. He returned. The hall leaned forward. Money, glass, sequins, envy. Like a single creature with many throats. And then, for the first time since Victor's dare, the laughter ran out of room. The room had a habit of laughing together, an instinct like geese turning at once. But when the smart key lay in Ernest Salgado's palm, the laughter thinned, the way a party quiets when someone mentions the time. Sound didn't vanish. It retreated to corners, whispers, glass, the soft electronic sigh of phones waking to record. Victor Hale stayed smiling, but the smile had to work harder now. "Tell me, Ernest," he said, pitching his voice for the chandeliers, "do you even know where a Ferrari keeps its heart?" It was cruelty shaped as banter. A few people chuckled on reflex, then checked one another's faces as if to confirm the correct emotion. Ernest rolled the fob with a thumb. He wasn't stalling. He was listening to weight, to balance, to the memory of a shape in his hand. When he closed his eyes for a second, the lines at his temples softened, like a knot learning the direction it should loosen. He opened them and met no one's gaze. "I accept," he said. The words went out flat and steady, and the room felt them the way a lake feels a stone. Rings moved outward, a gasp here, a nervous laugh there, a surprised "he said what?" from a man who had only been half paying attention. Omar Reyes didn't move. His posture was the stillness that comes just before a door opens. He had seen bets before, some made with chips, some with lives. This one was made with a name. Victor clapped once, the sound too sharp. "Excellent!" Then let us entertain." He glanced at a lighting tech, and the spots eased warmer over the yellow Ferrari, turning paint to something like molten daylight. "Cameras up," he added, as if cameras ever went down anymore. Maya Brooks stepped closer to the rope, her lens finding the old man's face. What she saw there wasn't hunger, and it wasn't fear. It was the look of someone who had walked a long way to stand exactly where he was standing. She wrote, "He accepts not to win a car, but to complete a sentence." Aidan Cole edged nearer too, shouldering through a seam in tuxedos. "Sir," he said softly, head tilted as if listening with Ernesto, "you don't owe him a show." Ernest, still watching the car, said, "Show's end." He lifted the fob. "Engines, keep speaking." He stepped past the velvet rope. No one stopped him. That in itself bent the air. Rules yielded to the gravity of a moment. The platform's edge caught the lights and threw them up his sleeves. He set his palm against the quarter panel, not pressing, only present. Under crystal and murmurs, he heard what he had always heard. The small settlement of material as heat left it, the tick and tock of a machine at rest, deciding whether to sleep. Victor leaned on the roof with a casualness that cost effort. "We're all rooting for you," he lied, and the lie made a brittle sound. Ernest opened the door. Leather exhaled. A tremor of scent, hide, adhesive, a ghost of fuel, rose like a memory rehearsed. He lowered himself into the seat, not tentative, not theatrical. The belt crossed his chest with a muted click. He set his left hand on the wheel, thumb finding the indent, as if it had been made for that exact thumb. His right hand rested briefly on the gear selector, a greeting. Then he adjusted the seat 2 precise clicks and slid the mirrors until the room's glow narrowed into useful lines. "Why is he touching everything?" someone whispered. "Because he respects it," Aidan whispered back, and didn't realize until he felt the heat of Maya's glance that he'd spoken out loud. The hall leaned. Phones rose like lilies seeking sun. In the side glass, Victor's jaw worked once. He looked past his reflection to the crowd and found something he did not like there, attention pointed away from him. Ernest breathed. He pressed the brake. He turned the key. A heartbeat of nothing. The kind of nothing that measures men, not machines. Then the yellow Ferrari woke. It was not a shout. It was a statement. The V12's first inhale drew the room's oxygen into it and gave it back as a tone that settled into ribs and chandelier stems. Crystal trembled delicately as if recognizing a pitch it had been cut to answer. The paint took the light and returned it as gold in motion. People who had prepared to laugh forgot how. On a table near the back, a wine glass chimed against a bottle and kept chiming. A little bell struck by vibration alone. Ernest didn't rev. He listened. His face eased into something like relief, the way a traveler relaxes when a foreign city suddenly smells like home. He made one small adjustment, fingers ghosting a switch, pressure feathered into the pedal, tuning resonance the way a musician nudges a string. The idle evened, the note rounded. Aidan felt hairs lift along his arms. Maya lowered her camera by an inch. She could have captured the frame, but some frames don't want capture, they want witness. She wrote, "He's not proving, he's remembering." Then she brought the camera back up, because witness needs a record. Victor's smile broke at the edges. "Congratulations," he said, and the words stumbled. "Even a stopped clock." He stopped himself, hearing the pettiness too late. He tried again. "Luck favors the bold." No one echoed him. Boldness wasn't what they had seen. Ernest touched the dash with his fingertips. "You're running rich," he said conversationally to the car. The sentence found ears anyway. A couple near the front frowned, trying to decide whether to be impressed. A man in a navy tux murmured, "I thought I heard," and didn't finish the sentence, wary of sounding like he believed in anything that wasn't the price printed on a catalog. Omar's earpiece ticked. "Do we intervene?" someone asked in his head. He didn't answer. Intervention implies danger. What he felt in his chest was not danger. It was the clean line of something true. Ernest turned the key back. The engine fell into silence that felt impossibly louder. He unbuckled, opened the door, and stepped out. The temperature of the room felt different against his face. Or maybe his face was different against the room. He didn't raise the fob like a trophy. He simply held it as if it were what it was, a promise made in public. He faced Victor for the first time. No triumph in him, no plea. "You gave your word," he said. A murmur rolled the length of the hall, soft at first, then thicker, like surf deciding how much shore to take. Heads turned toward Victor, as if pulled. This was the moment he had wanted, the center, but not like this. Here, the center asked for him, not the other way around. Victor lifted his chin. "It was a figure of speech," he said, and found the phrase small in his mouth. "Entertainment." Ernest glanced past him at the yellow Ferrari, then back. "Engines are honest," he said. "Words ought to be." The sentence set hooks. Maya's pen stopped, then rushed. Aidan exhaled a laugh, not at anyone, but at the relief of hearing a thing said properly. Somewhere near the bar, a donor put his phone down and forgot to pick it up again. Victor gestured. Too large, too late. "We're done here," he announced. "Thank you for—" He didn't finish. Omar had shifted 2 degrees, not blocking anyone, yet somehow taking away Victor's sense that he could move people with air. It wasn't force, it was geometry. The crowd felt it, and without choosing, held still. Ernest turned toward the open bay of the hood latch and paused. He didn't need to prove anything, the room knew, but proof wasn't the point. Respect was. He popped the hood and lifted it like a lid on a prayer. Under the chandeliers, the engine looked like an argument resolved by patience. He didn't touch, not yet. He hovered his hand and tracked heat, vibration, scent. "Valve drift," he murmured, a breath late. He tapped the air above a line as if noting a measure in a score. "If you push 5th the way you've been pushing, you won't like where she gives out." A man near Maya whispered, "God help me, he's right." He hadn't meant to say it aloud. Victor's smile went flat. "You expect us to believe—" "I don't," Ernest said. "I expect the car to keep telling the truth." He let the hood down gently until the latch found itself. For a second, no one moved. The knight held a coin over the table, deciding which way it would fall. Ernest placed the key fob on the acrylic platform beside the yellow Ferrari. It clicked softly, louder than a shout. "I accept," he had said. Now the room would discover what acceptance required. For a few seconds after the engine died, the hall held its breath like a diver too deep to surface. Silence didn't mean peace. It meant pressure. Crystal tinkled in tiny aftershocks. Someone sneezed and apologized to no one. The yellow Ferrari seemed brighter in the hush, as if the paint itself remembered how to glow. Ernest Salgado stood with the key fob set where all could see it. Neither claimed nor surrendered. He did not theatrically bow, did not milk the quiet. He merely looked at the car the way a craftsman looks at a chair he once built and just sat in again, measuring not pride, but whether it still keeps faith with the body. Victor Hale tried to recenter gravity with a laugh. It came out thin, the kind of sound that wears formal wear and fools only its owner. "A cute moment," he announced, sweeping a hand as if to shoo away awe. "Let's remember who owns the opera house." He tapped the chassis with 2 fingers, a clink that sounded like a debt. Murmurs didn't obey him. They gathered instead around Ernest, a small tide of attention made of shoe scuffs and the soft static of phones adjusting exposure. Maya Brooks tilted her mic toward the old man, then lowered it without asking a question. Some sentences need space first. Ernest lifted the hood with a care that suggested both strength and grief. The engine opened like a book, pages in steel and precision. He didn't touch right away. He hovered his hand in the heat and let fingertips map the afterbreath of moving parts. "She's been pushed wrong," he said to the air, voice level. Fifth like it's first. Whoever tuned her last chased noise instead of note. Someone in a navy tux snorted. Reflex, not confidence. He's bluffing. A younger man near him, grease still faint in the moons of his nails, Aidan Cole, shook his head without looking away. He hears it, he said. Idle came up rich, left bank lagged a hair. He's not guessing. Ernest traced the line of a fuel rail with 2 inches of space between skin and metal, like a priest blessing a forehead without touching it. Here, he murmured. Fuel pressure won't hold if you keep asking sprint numbers from a marathon heart. He nodded at a coupling, then another. Also here, vibration you don't feel at the wheel because leather lies. A man with a silver beard, who had been nodding through other people's sentences for years, stopped nodding. My 8112 does that, he said to his wife, surprised to hear truth in his own mouth. She squeezed his arm as if to say, hush, we're learning. Victor leaned on charm the way a drowning man leans on a reed. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had our fun. The gentleman has shared his opinions. Now, not opinions, Maya said, not loudly, but with the grammar of a period. She had her camera trained and her notebook open. Find me one real mechanic who heard that start and disagrees with him. Eyes turned. The room, which prized status, briefly remembered competence. Victor's smile thinned to the width of a blade. And you are? Someone who listens, Maya said. She didn't offer credentials. She offered attention. Cameras around them, now that she had given the crowd permission to doubt, pointed not at Victor's cufflinks, but at Ernest's still hands and the engine's beautiful logic. Omar Reyes had not moved much, but his patience felt different, less like policy, more like principle. Through the earpiece a voice asked again, Contain? He clicked his tongue against his teeth and said nothing. Contain what? Clarity. Ernest let the hood rest and step-latched it down. He did not turn toward Victor until he'd made sure the latch found itself. Then he did, and the turn itself quieted people the way thunder can quiet a field. You said the car, he reminded, tone almost gentle. But the car is not the point. He lifted one hand and touched 2 fingers against the breastbone of his coat, then his temple. Names, Mr. Hale, that's the point. The word names landed like a heavier object than the others, dropped from an unmeasured height. Older guests recognized something in it, a courtroom smell, a family smell, a paper smell of signatures and erasures. Victor's eyes flashed with the instinct to mock. He strangled it. Mockery had become a smaller currency in here. And what is your name again? He asked, aiming for a surgeon's cool and missing by a street. Salgado? I've never heard of you. Most people don't hear the people who built their listening, Ernest said. He wasn't performing a line. He was stating a fact. That's fine, until someone starts bragging about echoes. Aidan barked a laugh he hadn't meant to let out. It wasn't disrespect. It was relief, the body recognizing alignment. Heads turned toward him, then toward Maya, then toward Omar, because a crowd searches for guides when the floor moves. Maya stepped a half-pace nearer the acrylic platform. Mr. Salgado, she said, name correct on the first try. Where did you learn to hear like that? Ernest considered the question with the same honest pause he had given the engine. 30 years in Modena, he said. Some on the floor, some at a bench, none in a room like this. He looked around at chandeliers and glass and bright shoes. Rooms like this mistake shine for signal. A ripple passed. It wasn't applause. It was air figuring out how to carry a different kind of weight. Victor saw it. Something panicked, flared, and vanished behind his eyes, replaced by a salesman's emergency smile. You claim a lot, he said lightly. Do you have proof? He lifted his chin toward the phones, daring them to feed. Maya's camera did not blink. Proof is a fair ask, she said. But so is respect when someone demonstrates a thing you can't fake. She had already been learning Ernest's posture, a quiet that does not waver when stared at. Show us something only someone who made these would know. Ernest nodded once, as if she'd asked him to breathe. He reopened the door, leaned in, and pressed a pair of buttons no one had noticed. A faint relay click, a micro beat of lights. Then he looked at Victor without any heat. Your toggles are reversed from factory on this unit. He tapped the dash with the same care one uses to tap a sleeping child's shoulder. Your custom did that. Cosmetic symmetry. It bothers men who've trained their hands to find switches in the dark. He paused. I counted the beats you missed reaching for them. Aiden inhaled sharply, pure, grateful recognition. I knew something was odd, he whispered, the sentence aimed at himself and landing on Maya's recorder. Near the rear bar, a man who had never been corrected in public put his phone down again, slower this time. Victor's mouth shaped a counter and failed to produce one. The clock in his head ticked too loudly. He pivoted to the crowd instead. Enough! The word ricocheted but didn't return. This was a joke. Entertainment. He laughed. A tired coin rolled across a table. From the far side, a woman in a silver dress said, not unkindly, "It doesn't feel like a joke anymore." Her husband nodded, surprised by his own courage. Courage in rooms like this often comes in the form of agreement. Omar's stance had changed by degrees. If you watched only with the eyes, you might miss it. If you watched with your sense of exits and distances, you saw it clearly. He had moved from guarding Victor to guarding the moment. Ernest lifted the key fob and didn't move it, letting its small weight speak. "I don't want your car," he said simply. "I want you to keep your words dressed in honesty, and I want a single other thing." He looked past Victor, not to the cameras, not to the donors, but to the car again, the yellow Ferrari that had become an altar and a witness. "I want the right names on the right work." There it was, the hinge. The crowd felt the click of it but didn't know yet which way the door would swing. "Names?" Victor echoed, smile stiffening into something closer to teeth. "Whose names? Yours?" He laughed, found no chorus, and let the sound fall. Ernest did not answer the taunt. He answered the question. "There was a team," he said. "There were hands. Some of those names were erased when ink became expensive and memory inconvenient." He didn't look at Victor when he added, "Some families learned to inherit what they did not build." Now the hall breathed the way a storm front breathes, slow, electric. Nouns appeared in the air. Inherit, erase, team, build. Old stories woke. Contracts twitched in their frames on office walls, far from here. Maya understood the narrative had found its true center. She didn't push it with a speech. She did the thing real listeners do. She made a small space. "Can we talk?" "After?" she asked. Ernest nodded once enough. Victor tried one last pivot, the benevolent host. "If it's recognition you want," he said, "we can discuss something, a donation, a plaque." He aimed for magnanimous and struck transactional. Ernest smiled, weary and clean. "Names aren't donations," he said, "they're returns." The line did not need applause, it needed room. The room gave it. Phones captured faces now, not Ernest's, not the car's, but Victor's. A different trial had begun, not legal, not yet, but social. The court where people decide which stories to carry home. Omar stepped just enough to put himself between the nearest eager sycophant and Ernest's shoulder. Not protection from harm, protection from theft of time. The gesture said, "The next move belongs to the man who earned it." Ernest set the fob back down, exact as before. "You said if I started it," he reminded, "not to needle, but to align." "I did. I will leave you to start the other thing." He meant the truth. He meant the correction. He meant the part Victor feared. He turned away from the car at last. The crowd opened for him the way it had closed for others, a path shaped by respect rather than fear. Aidan, eyes bright with the kind of hope a trade can feel, called after him, "Sir, will you teach?" Ernest looked back, a tired blue warming. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "Bring clean hands and a willingness to dirty them." When he reached the rope, Maya fell in beside him without being told. "I'll listen," she said. "I'll get it right." He nodded, believing her. Behind them, Victor stood in the light he had ordered and discovered it was not flattering. His reflection in the yellow Ferrari looked like a man trying to own a sun. Around him, the room, a living instrument, had tuned itself to a new key. And the night, which had begun as a dare, finally learned what it was daring itself to become. Chapter 4. Names in the Metal. The hall had adjusted to a new gravity and didn't know how to stand under it. People who'd come to be seen were now trying to see. Status likes bright surfaces. Truth prefers edges. The yellow Ferrari threw chandelier light across faces that had learned to hide in it. Victor Hale tried to seize the interval. "We all admire a good story," he said, voice lacquered. "But admiration isn't authentication. Let's not confuse a moving moment with—" He searched for a word that would keep him sovereign. "With provenance." He expected nods. He got interest elsewhere. Maya Brooks raised one hand, palm open, as if requesting a careful note from an orchestra. "Provenance is exactly what I want," she said. "Mr. Salgado, will you show us something verifiable? A mark, a pattern, anything that proves you didn't just read a blog once and guess well?" Ernest didn't bristle. His calm had the practical kindness of a workshop towel. "Verification is fair," he said. He stepped to the open door again and reached beneath the dash. "Factory teams leave fingerprints no one thinks to hide." He pulled the carpet lip back slightly. "When the wiring harness is dressed by hand, the binder wraps it in a figure 8, 8 loops exactly, tied off with a half hitch. Automation uses 5. He exposed an inch. 8 neat loops, half hitch like a small signature. A hush moved outward. It had the weight of learning, not spectacle. A man who'd talked loudly all evening leaned forward with his mouth open and didn't make a sound. Ernest eased the carpet back into place, respectful as he'd found it. In 3 years, they changed adhesive, and the smell changed with it. Acetone lingers differently than citrus solvent. Once you've lived with both, you won't mistake them. He pressed a palm lightly to the floorboard, inhaled, and nodded to himself. This one stayed with acetone 6 months longer than the memo said. "Memo?" someone asked, half scoff, half curiosity. Ernest looked up. "There's always a memo." He looked back down, gentled the trim home, and stood. "I'm not guessing. I'm remembering." Aidan Cole couldn't contain it. "No one fakes that," he said. "You can Google talk specs. You can't fake the way glue ages." He turned to the cluster of donors near him, his voice steady, not defiant. If he were bluffing, he'd brag loud. "He's noticing." Maya's recorder caught the word noticing like a prize. She glanced at Omar Reyes. He gave the smallest nod, permission to keep going, not from power, but from the house's quiet conscience. Victor exhaled through his nose. Gentlemen of certain rooms learned to wield patience like a club. "You've found trivia," he said. "Fine, but trivia isn't title." He smiled at the audience as if the line were a pact. Ernest tilted his head, considering whether to spend more breath. "You want title," he said at last. "You want credit lines?" He looked past the crowd as if through distance rather than bodies. There were blueprints, drafts where names lived before a legal eraser learned our surnames. He paused. Those papers had a tremor in the line weight 2 weeks before a holiday because a man named Silvestri cut back on coffee for his blood pressure and his hand steadied. If you find those drawings, you'll see the difference like a heartbeat easing. He half smiled. You can keep a name off a page. You cannot keep a man's hand out of the curve it learned to draw. The image landed. A room far from chandeliers, a pen lifting and settling in human rhythm. People were quiet in a different way now, the way a church quiets when someone mentions a specific kindness. Stories, Victor said, but softer because the word felt smaller. Let's not romanticize. Maya didn't argue. She worked. Her thumbs moved quick on her phone, a private search in a public room, not to verify Ernest via a stranger's blog, but to find a crack she knew existed. A trade article from years ago, a photo of a line team in Modena with a row of faces unnamed. She glanced at the image, pinched, zoomed. A grey-bearded man at the far right caught mid-turn, eyes on something just out of frame. She held the phone up, didn't declare, didn't crown. She simply asked, "Is this you?" Ernest didn't snatch at the rectangle. He took a step closer and squinted with the care of someone who respects both memory and pixels. His mouth didn't smile. It softened. "That was a long day," he said. "We ran late because a shipment of injectors arrived with a flaw so small it could have been pried. Wouldn't admit it was there." He tapped the screen lightly, not touching the face. Silvestri took his lunch at his bench to help us catch up. He had 2 pairs and pretended it was plenty. The detail drew breath out of the room. Maya could have cried from the accuracy of the smallness. Big lies paint in broad strokes. Truth is stingy with its color and richer for it. Victor tried to step into the new light and cast it as his own. "If he wants credit, we can arrange recognition," he said. "My foundation loves to honor craftsmen. The Ernest Award, I like the ring." "Recognition is a mirror," Ernest said gently. "Credit is a ledger." He didn't put heat on it, he put weight. A woman near the front, silver dress, spine that had learned to carry rooms, lifted her chin. "If a ledger has been wrong, fix it," she said to Victor, as if she were giving a graceful man a chance to remain graceful. He smiled reflexively and found no smile to borrow. "We'll look into it," he said. A phrase like vapor, shaped like a bottle. "Tonight is also a kind of ledger," Maya said, her voice even, not prosecutorial. "People will leave here carrying a story. That is a kind of entry, whether you sign it or not." Phones recorded. Not the car. People knew they could Google cars later. They recorded faces learning. Ernest glanced at Aiden. "What do you hear?" he asked. Aiden blinked, startled to be included. He listened, not to the engine, the hood was down, but to the room. "Less laughing," he said, "more weighing, people checking where they were standing." Ernest nodded. "Good ear." Then quieter, to the car. "They'll learn." Omar shifted just enough to block a hand reaching past the rope for a selfie with Victor in the yellow Ferrari's reflection. It was a polite denial enforced by geometry again. The hand withdrew, chastened by an elegance it couldn't argue with. Victor's options narrowed like hallways. He tried gravitas. "I despise witch hunts," he said, the phrase chosen to make him sound principled. "I built my life on honoring innovation. If there were irregularities, they predate me." Ernest didn't bite where bait was offered. "Irregularities have dates," he said. "So do corrections." A donor near the back, the kind who chaired things, cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale," he said, tone mild enough to pass as friendly. "A public promise was made." He gestured toward the acrylic where the fob still lay like a verdict. "A small one, perhaps, symbolic. But I've chaired enough galas to know symbols are how nights like this tell the truth about themselves." Loyalty shifted with an audible click. It wasn't mutiny. It was teacherly, a room reminding its host how to be one. Victor stared at the key as if it had betrayed him by becoming heavy. He lifted it, forcing a smile that now belonged to the key more than to his face. "A bet is a bet," he said, straining for magnanimity. "Take it, Mr. Salgado." Ernest shook his head. It wasn't a flourish. It was a return to center. "You needed the promise more than I need the car," he said. "Let it teach you how to keep larger ones." He placed his hand. 2 fingers on the fender. I came for a name. He looked at Maya. Not mine alone, then at Aiden, for the ones you'll teach, then finally at Victor, and for the ones you still could honor if you decide to be better than the room expected of you. For the first time that night, Victor didn't have a sentence ready. Silence found him, then stayed. Maya closed her notebook, not as an ending, but as a start. I'd like to hear the rest, she said to Ernest. What was taken? What can be given back? He nodded once. Tomorrow, he said. Work begins in daylight. The crowd breathed, something between a sigh and a vow. People began to trade names, not for status, but for contact. Send me the article, someone said to Maya. I have a cousin in Modena, another murmured to Aiden. Lines extended, human, not velvet. Omar stepped aside as Ernest approached the rope. The old man paused at the boundary he had never needed permission to cross and looked back at the yellow Ferrari. The paint threw gold across his face. Keep them honest, he told the machine, as if it were capable of holding men to account. Perhaps it was. He nodded to Omar, a soldier's courtesy to another, and to Aiden, who stood a little taller, as if his trade had just been told it was worthy of its own cathedral. Behind them, Victor remained in the light he had ordered, realizing that illumination reveals as easily as it flatters. He held the key without knowing whether it signified power or debt. The room decided for him, softly, together. It turned its attention to the old man not as a curiosity, but as a standard, and loyalty, which had arrived dressed for a party, began to look like something a person might take home and use. The hall had loosened its tie. Conversations shifted from compliments to coordinates. Who knew whom? Who could pull a file? Who remembered a name from a factory floor across an ocean? The yellow Ferrari kept throwing gold, but people were no longer looking at light for instruction. Victor Hale found a darker corner of the stage lighting and stepped into it like a man testing shadow for shelter. He lifted his phone and spoke too softly for the room, just loud enough for the person at the other end. Get me Julian, he said. Pause. PR now. Draft something about honoring legacy, correcting record, no, not liability. Language of goodwill. Another pause. And legal on standby. He ended the call and turned his smile back on, thinner than before, like metal drawn too long across a file. Omar Reyes saw the motion, not the phone, how shoulders narrow when a man negotiates with himself. The earpiece nudged his ear with a coordinator's request for a tasteful reset. He didn't answer. The room wasn't misbehaving. It had finally learned manners. Maya Brooks had moved to the platform's edge, where the acrylic met marble. Her camera rested at her hip now, lens cap dangling, as she thumbed notes into her phone. She typed figure-8 harness, acetone linger, Silvestri's pears. She didn't embellish. The details did that job themselves. She looked up and found Ernest Salgado watching the crowd as if listening to a large engine. The rhythm of thought, the misfires of doubt, the first clean note of belief. A tremor rippled at the ballroom entrance. 2 black suits, not security, legal, stepped through with the pace of men who knew they moved with a CEO's breath in their pockets. They were careful with their hands, open-palmed, nothing to alarm. Their smiles were designed to be forgotten after compliance. Ms. Brooks? One of them said gently. Mind a quick word? Just housekeeping. Our venue has policies about filming. He gestured toward a side corridor where chandeliers dissolved into practical fluorescence. Maya's spine remembered every meeting where a quick word tried to become a lock. She didn't step. She asked, "Which policy?" "I signed the press waiver at registration." Her voice stayed even, the kind that prefers facts to theater. "Of course," he said, already producing a printed sheet. His finger drifted to a paragraph that could be read 2 ways if a person wanted it to. "This clause covers proprietary exhibits. We're happy to process your footage through our media team for release." Release is a polite word for control. Before Maya answered, Omar appeared, not between them exactly, but at a distance that changed the geometry again. "She's within the public event footprint," he said, one hand at his belt, not touching the radio, just reminding it existed. His tone carried the measured weight of a policy manual that had been memorized and then humanized. "Content gathered here is observational. If Mr. Hale objects, he can say so on camera." The lawyers evaluated him like a door they hadn't noticed on the blueprint. One of them pasted on a smile. "We appreciate good security," he said. "We're simply streamlining." "Streamlining is for pipes," Omar said. "She's press." He didn't budge. The lawyers didn't either, but they recalculated. The corridor lost its suggestion of inevitability. Across the room, Victor clinked a fork against a glass to reclaim a dais he no longer trusted. "Friends," he said, and the word worked less than it used to. "A night like this is about generosity. Let's keep it there." He gestured toward the donation screen, cycling silent numbers along one wall. The numbers had slowed to a crawl a few minutes earlier, uncertain whether generosity without honesty counted. Aidan Cole hovered near Ernest, unsure of the rules for proximity to someone you want to learn from. He wiped his palms on his trousers and immediately regretted that they were clean enough to show the gesture. "If they take her footage," he murmured, not very quietly, "this night gets turned into whatever they want to say it was." It wasn't paranoia, it was shop floor wisdom. Stories get sanded until they fit the shelf. Ernest eyed the lawyers, then the yellow Ferrari, then Maya. "Engines teach patience," he said mostly to Aidan, "but they also teach when to apply pressure." He looked at Omar. "May I?" He nodded at the car. Omar gave a small, precise nod that meant, "Yes, but make it count." Ernest reached into the open cabin, not for drama, but for memory. His fingers found the glove box, pressed the latch, and lifted a leather folio embossed with the car's insignia. He set it on the acrylic like a carefully handled tool. The crowd recognized documentation when it saw it. Bodies drew nearer without meaning to. He opened the folio. Inside, maintenance logs, test stamps, a dealership inspection checklist with a service tech's notes in tidy caps, photocopies of shipping manifests. He didn't flourish. He slid one page toward the light. A pre-delivery inspection with a check mark beside ECU custom mapping, and beneath it a scrawl, initials and a date. "Yours?" he asked Victor without looking up. Victor hesitated a half-breath, then, "Standard for a unit like this," he said. He made it sound like competence. It sounded like customization. Ernest tapped the margin. "Mapping dates to a week. The factory shipped a batch with a miscalibrated sensor. We caught it on the line at random, 15 units, swapped the sticks, updated memos. This VIN would have missed the factory fix if a dealer uprated it on receipt." He angled the page so the lawyers could see. He didn't accuse. He pointed. The younger lawyer swallowed. He knew how dates and duty converse. He didn't need the old man to elaborate. If a fix was logged at factory after a car left with the batch, dealer changes carried the burden of tune. The room, which had learned to love the sound of its own laughter, discovered the intensity of reading. Phones didn't film now, they photographed. Screens framed the service page, the initial check, the VIN that matched the placard under the windshield. Evidence is an unshowy actor. Its talent is refusing to be anyone else. Victor's smile tried to maintain architecture. "We upgraded," he said, aiming it at donors who valued upgrades. "This is what excellence looks like." "It can," Maya said, stepping to the folio, her camera returning to her eye with the quiet finality of a seatbelt clicked. "Or it can be what erases who built excellence in the first place." She took a picture of the page, then another of the VIN. She did not rush. She made a habit of getting it right before getting it first. The lawyers recalculated again. One of them tried a gentler tactic. "Mr. Salgado," he said, warmer now, "we truly would like to hear your story. Perhaps we can schedule—" Ernest closed the folio with one palm, protective without possessive. "Schedule will be tomorrow," he said. "At a shop, with tools, with whoever made decisions about names." He looked at Victor again, not unkind, and found a man who had never stood in a room that did not arrange itself for him. "You can come," he added. "You might like how engines sound when no one claps at them." A small ripple of laughter escaped the crowd, soft, relieved, human. It didn't mock, it agreed. Victor heard the rhythm slipping and reached for a new instrument, magnanimity sharpened to a point. "Then allow me to be the first to donate to your workshop," he said, drawing the word as if it were quaint. "A sizable grant. We'll put your name on a wall." Ernest's eyes brightened with an old sadness. "Walls take names easily," he said. "Ledgers resist." He turned to the donors, who were now collectively a jury that didn't need to punish so much as to calibrate. "You know the difference. Your lives run on it." Omar caught the older lawyer's gaze and held it just long enough to establish a truce. The man looked away first, not defeated, only convinced the night would cost more if he pushed. Aidan leaned in closer to Ernest, voice low. "If they back off, is that a win?" he asked like a student checking talk, wanting tight, fearing strip. "It's a start," Ernest said. "Wins allowed. Starts sound like a wrench finding the right notch." Maya angled her camera to catch Ernest's hands. Scar maps, veins like blueprints. She lowered it again. "Tomorrow then," she said. "What time?" "Early," Ernest answered. "Engines behave better before people ruin the air." The ballroom, sensing the end of an act, began to move in ways parties move. Coats retrieved, whispers traded, numbers saved. But the movement was thoughtful. People weren't fleeing, they were forwarding. Victor remained near the yellow Ferrari, marooned by the island he'd built to stand on. He placed the key fob in his pocket, as if asserting a border to his body. He felt the outline of it through fabric, a small, rectangular truth that now weighed more than before. A donor he respected approached him with the kindness of a man offering a dignified option. "You'll want to get ahead of this," he murmured. "Not with money, with names." He squeezed Victor's shoulder and left it at that. Victor's eyes flicked to Omar, to Maya, to Ernest, speaking quietly with Aidan. He saw not enemies, but a configuration he could not command. He straightened his jacket as if the seam could answer a question his heart would not. At the exit, Ernest paused. He turned back once more to the yellow Ferrari. The gold in the paint found his face and warmed it. "Hold them to it," he said, just loud enough for the car and the room to share. The machine, as ever, answered with silence that meant continuity. Maya fell in beside him. Aidan hovered on the other side, unsure if he was allowed to walk with men who had just moved a room. Omar shadowed them at a respectful distance, the way a good guard escorts not a celebrity, but a standard. Victor watched the three of them leave and discovered that his name sounded different inside his head than it had at the beginning of the night. Not ruined, retuned. Pride, resisting, called it an insult. Something truer suggested it might be an invitation he didn't yet know how to accept. Behind him, donors were telling one another that they had attended a gala. But what they meant, and would mean tomorrow, was that they had attended a beginning. By late morning, sunlight pushed hard against the shop's grimy windows, the kind of light that doesn't flatter, it inspects. Dust floated in straight beams, each mote part of an audit. The yellow Ferrari wasn't there, yet its memory lingered like a lamp someone had switched off only minutes ago. Ernest Salgado wiped his hands on a rag that had been washed too many times to count. He moved slower now, not from fatigue but from deliberation. Every gesture meant something in this place. Aidan Cole mimicked him unconsciously, slower, more careful, trying to earn the patience of steel. On the whiteboard behind them, the list of names had grown overnight. Black marker carried surnames no one in the gala had cheered for, names that looked ordinary until you realized they were the secret architecture of velocity. Maya Brooks filmed the board in close detail, letting the ink strokes tremble in her frame. She whispered as she worked, almost like prayer. Every name is a bolt. Victor Hale stood apart, suit jacket slung over a chair, sleeves rolled higher than habit. His phone buzzed with the nervous energy of people waiting for a line. He ignored it. He looked at the names as if they were a crowd he couldn't buy tickets for. "Still thinking plaque?" Ernest asked without glancing back. Victor exhaled. "Thinking statement, acknowledgement, something no lawyer can erase without looking obvious." He rubbed his forehead. "They'll fight me. Then you'll learn what we lived," Ernest said. "You don't measure courage in applause. You measure it in resistance." Maya swung her lens toward Victor. "What do you actually want from this?" she asked. "Not the gala answer. The one that won't fit in a press release." Victor hesitated. Silence filled with the sound of Aiden's ratchet, steady clicks marking truth's tempo. Finally, he said, "To stop being smaller than my father's shadow, and to build something that doesn't need to steal names to feel tall." The honesty startled even him. Omar, leaning near the door, gave the slightest nod, like a guard who had just confirmed the perimeter was secure. Outside, engines announced arrivals. Tires crunched gravel, doors shut with decisive thumps. The shop's morning quiet fractured. Omar straightened as 3 men and 1 woman in business attire entered, trailed by assistants clutching tablets. Factory representatives. Their badges carried the crest Ernest had once bent his back beneath. "Mr. Hale," the tallest said, "we've come because your calls reached us before dawn." He glanced at the cameras, at Maya's stance. "This is irregular." Victor didn't flinch. "So was erasing a team." He gestured at the board. "Look at it. Tell me which of those names don't belong." The visitors exchanged tight smiles, meant for damage control. "Mr. Salgado," the woman said carefully, "we respect your passion, but history is complex. Records." Ernest cut her off with a raised hand, not aggressive, final. He walked to the workbench, lifted a greasy notebook bound with tape. "Complex. This is simple. My notes. Day 39, winter shift, injector array failure, recalibrated with Silvestri. Day 40, exhaust resonance fixed with Alves. Day 41, test driver reported." He slapped the book shut. "These aren't legends, they're logs." Aiden stepped forward, voice shaking but firm. "He taught me talk by feel. You can't fake that. You can't fake 30 years of this." Maya captured every second, her microphone hungry for the cadence of truth. The factory reps felt the room slipping, authority leaving their suits and gathering instead on a scarred workbench under fluorescent lights. Victor surprised them all. He faced the reps, shoulders squared. "Put the names back," he said. "Everywhere. Factory archives, websites, plaques. Or I go public." He pointed at Maya. "She already has it all." Silence pressed, heavier than marble. One rep finally muttered, "Do you realize what you're asking?" "Yes," Victor said, "for the first time in my life." Ernest turned, eyes blue fire. "Names weigh nothing on paper, but to a man, to a woman, they weigh like engines." The oldest rep exhaled, long, weary. "You'll burn us all." Ernest shook his head. "You'll temper yourselves. Steel is better after fire." Omar shifted closer, just enough to remind everyone where the room's balance lay. His stillness carried consequence. The woman rep looked at Victor again, saw the decision already hardened. "We'll need time," she said. "You'll have until Monday," Victor replied. His voice carried the strange strength of someone finally tired of being weak. The visitors left with their tablets heavy, silence following them out. When the door rattled shut, the shop exhaled as one. Victor sagged onto a stool. "God help me," he said. "I think I just chose sides." Ernest poured him another coffee. "No," he said, "you just remembered you had one." Maya stopped filming long enough to whisper to herself, The ledger speaks. Aidan wiped sweat from his brow, grease marking his skin. If they fix the records, will that be enough? Ernest looked at the board again. His voice softened. Enough for them, never enough for us. But it's a start. And starts, they can roar louder than endings. Outside, sirens rose and faded in the city. Just another song of a world that hadn't learned what this workshop had decided, that names are not decorations, they are engines, and the day was only beginning. By afternoon, the sky had gone the color of unpolished steel. The shop's fluorescent hum felt like a vow. Maya Brooks had already sent a shortcut of the morning, 30 clean seconds ending on the whiteboard of names. Not sensational, not scored with drama. Just names, inked by a steady hand. It began to move through phones the way a rumor hopes to, but only truth manages. Quietly, irresistibly. A chime at the roll-up door, a silhouette broke the light. Victor Hale stepped in with a laptop tucked under his arm and a file folder under the other, Old World and New World apologies carried like tools. His suit jacket was on, but the tie was gone. He looked like a person walking into the principal's office to sign something he should have signed earlier in his life. I spoke to Modena, he said, not to boast, and to the North American office. Monday is still Monday. But today is today. He opened the laptop on the workbench, slid the folder beside it. I can't rewrite the archives this second. I can publish what I know, where I can. His hands hovered over the keys. Names, work, dates, what was erased, what returns. He didn't look at his PR thread. He opened a blank page on his company site's CMS and typed the title Start with the Names. The cursor blinked like a held breath. He began to write Powertrain Development, Team Leads, R. Alves, C. Silvestri, E. Salgado, et al. Below it he added paragraphs, short, declarative, careful as talk clicks. He linked nothing he couldn't source. He overstated nothing he couldn't prove. When he finished, he turned the screen so Ernest Salgado could read. Ernest read slowly, lips moving just enough to let memory lay next to the text. He reached the final line. Corrections are not favors. They are the minimum respect due to the truth. His chest lifted once, held, released. Publish, he said. Victor clicked. The page went live. In the corner of the shop, time seemed to adjust itself, like a belt finding the right groove on a pulley. A minute later, Maya's phone buzzed. Her eyes moved side to side. It's spreading, she said, more fact than thrill. The page, the names, people are tagging their fathers. Aidan leaned over Maya's shoulder. A photo had appeared under the new post, an old picture of a line team. Someone had circled a face, Silvestri, with captions in a language of thanks and ravioli emojis and a heart. He had two pairs, Maya said softly, smiling at nothing and everything, and pretended it was plenty. The roll-up door rattled again. This time factory reps returned, minus the stiffness. The woman set a small, scuffed cardboard tube on the bench, rubber bands buckling its middle. We brought something, she said, formal voice cracked by sincerity. It was in a drawer that shouldn't have been a drawer. She slid the core out and unfurled a large blueprint, edge-frayed, graphite lines patient and sure. Names floated at the bottom right, like quiet signatures. On the right among them, E. Salgado. The shop didn't cheer. That would have been the wrong kind of noise. The room simply became very still, as if stillness were a way to touch paper without touching it. Victor stepped back to let Ernest approach first. Ernest's fingers hovered, then landed, careful as a prayer that had finally found its words. We chased this curve until winter broke, he murmured, tracing the line with a flat fingertip. He touched Silvestri, Alves, then landed on his own name, with the gentleness of a man who understood both weight and mercy. I used to think lines were just directions, he said. They are proofs. The oldest rep cleared his throat. We'll frame it properly, he said. Museo, factory wall, digital archive. He winced at his next admission. And we will issue an apology. The word fought him, then obeyed. Public. Ernest nodded once, accepting what could be accepted, not what could never be paid. Add the technicians, he said, the ones without signatures. Find them. They know who they are. We will, the woman said. She looked at Victor and found a man who was doing the unfashionable thing of changing his mind in public. And Mr. Hale, thank you for pushing us to be better. Victor's face did an unfamiliar thing, received thanks with humility instead of banking it as interest. I'm trying not to push for myself, he said. I've done enough of that. Omar, who had watched this many times in messier rooms, let his shoulders drop a notch. He allowed himself a small joke. If anyone tries to streamline this apology, he said, I've got a torque wrench for their sentences. They laughed, clean laughter, the kind you can leave in the room without regretting it. Come, Ernest said, practical as a bell. He rolled the blueprint gently, secured it with new bands, and handed it to Aidan. Museum later. Right now, engines. He nodded at the coupe still on the bay. Front cam seal. Teach me what you think. Teach you? Aidan blinked. Ernest's eyes warmed. A master is just a student with stubborn knees. Aidan set his stance, brought the light in close, and began to name what he saw, not performing for praise, but reporting to a partner. Hairline seep at the 12 o'clock, belt scuff faint, tensioner a shade tight. We loosen, reset, and... He glanced up. Recheck. Good, Ernest said. Now show me your hands finding it. They worked. Maya filmed for a minute, then put the camera down and simply watched. The reps stood nearby, unexpectedly reluctant to leave. Victor found a broom and began to sweep the 10 honest square feet near the bay. He did it poorly at first, then less poorly. Omar let him. Some lessons require an audience of exactly no one. By evening, the sky had turned copper in the shop's small window. The whiteboard had new names, penciled lightly. People messaged from far cities, claiming their bit of talk. The blueprint lay safe in its tube with a piece of masking tape stuck crooked on the side. Return to Museo. Victor checked his phone once. The page numbers climbed, comments multiplied, half of them grateful, a quarter skeptical, a fraction wild. He didn't reply. He had already said the thing that mattered. He turned to Ernest. Take the yellow Ferrari for the weekend, he said gently. Not as a gift, as a witness. He held up the key fob like a token you offer not to pay a debt, but to keep a promise moving. Drive it where you want, past places that forgot you, and places that never let you forget yourself. Ernest took the fob and weighed it. I once thought this shape only meant money, he said. It can mean repair. He pocketed it with the same care he'd use for a photograph. Bring it back Monday, Victor added. We'll go to Modena. He swallowed. Together. They shook hands, firm, unperformed. Omar put the broom back. Maya reached for her bag. Aidan wiped the bench until the wood grain looked pleased. Outside, the evening held that soft summer hush that makes cities sound like villages. Ernest opened the shop door and stood with the others, looking out at nothing and everything. The yellow Ferrari was still at the gala, but in some warm corner of the night, its color seemed to glow anyway, as if gold were not a metal, but a verb. Before you all go, Maya said, lifting the camera just enough to frame faces but not steal them, say what you want people to hold after the video ends. Omar spoke first. Hold your ground, he said. Politely, if you can. Firmly, if you must. Aidan. Learn the feel before the number. Victor. Fix the ledger in public. Ernest saved his for last. Start with the names, he said. Then, after a beat, and keep the engine honest. Maya lowered the camera. That's the title, she said. That's the whole thing. They parted with the easy choreography of people who have shared a weight and set it down without dropping it. Ernest walked toward the bus stop instead of calling a car. Aidan trotted to catch up, already asking, "Tomorrow, what time?" Omar locked up. Victor lingered by the door long enough to inhale a shop's air and decide he wanted more of that in his life. Maya stood in the street's soft traffic and looked back at the window. The whiteboard was visible from outside, names slanting in shared ink. She hit upload on the day's cut and sent it into the world. Somewhere across town, a son called his mother to say, "Look, they finally wrote Dad down." Somewhere else, a man in a small apartment touched a drawer full of old badges and felt less alone. And in a ballroom that had learned the wrong lesson the night before, a yellow Ferrari waited under watchlights, quiet as a reliable truth. If this story meant something to you, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that names matter, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.